Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. We are joined with Jeremy Mullins, registered dietitian and director of the My Transformation Challenge with First Forum. And he's here today. Several of us attended back in January when we did a general nutrition workshop over calories and the macros and how to break all that up and all that kind of stuff. Under the circumstances now, obviously we can't gather at the gym, so Jeremy wanted to jump on here, bring you guys all that information. It'll be a good refresher for some of us, and for many of us it'll be brand new information for us to dive into and kind of start improving our diet during this time, and then after all this craziness is over, we can get on the right track. So we want to thank Jeremy for joining us and look forward to hearing from him.
Yeah, I mean, only having 9 people in attendance to my lecture may have hurt my ego, right? But no, it's always fun to teach, the basics of nutrition. That's kind of what we're going to go over today. And I always like to preface it, there's so much out there in media, there's so much out there in nutrition books or unfortunately social media on what is the best diet. And what I always like to do is break it down into the basics, right? So we look at all diets out there. Most people are trying to look at it from a standpoint of emotional, or they're doing that diet, so they're trying to sell you on, okay, this is the best plan because X, Y, and Z. And then it took me, probably 10 years into my training to kind of get away from that and being like, okay, well, the research says this or the book says this versus, okay, well, let's look at all these different diets out there, and the ones that are successful, look at what they have in common versus looking at, okay, what are they doing different, right? Yeah. And that's kind of where, we look at, teaching, okay, calories. Calories are found in all foods, okay? All foods are either a protein, carb, or fat, and those are your macronutrients, right? And a lot of people are out there, they hear, well, I'm on a macro diet, and they really have no idea what macros are. It's just that it was taught like, oh, this is a macro diet, right? Or I'll hear people say, well, I'm, low carb, or I'm, plant-based, or I'm keto, you can fill in the blank. Well, all of those diets come down to being a macro-based diet because every food we eat is either a protein, carb, or fat, or a combination of 2 or 3 of them, okay? And that's what we want to talk about today. And we'll start with calories first, because a lot of people are, used to calories. They've either counted them, or they know if they pick up a label, and I guess water wouldn't be a good example, but we pick up a Gatorade or, an post-workout drink or something, and we look at the back of the label and it has calories on it, okay? So we look at calories. Definition of that is just, it's a unit of energy that our body burns, right? If we look at it from a clinical standpoint, it's, how much, 1 calorie is the temperature in Celsius it takes to raise, in a calorimeter 1 degree, okay? Think of it as energy, right? So we burn calories as far as like our body burns calories for energy. Calories in food is energy that we eat, okay? And there's some things that make up how many calories that we burn a day. The biggest one being our resting metabolic rate, okay? And that's just how many calories it takes to keep our bodies alive, okay? And we'll give you 2 examples, and hopefully we're how much you weigh?
245.
Okay, so we're a little different. If you sat there all day long and did nothing, you would burn roughly 2,400 calories a day. And that's just a given number. We, as a society, about 10 calories per pound is what our body burns at rest, okay? Now, our brain, our liver, our organs burn more calories than, say, our body fat does, okay? And then muscle tissue burns more calories than, muscle tissue burns more calories than our body fat, and then organs burn the most as far as calories, right? But on average, it's 10 calories per pound, okay? Now, we do have to take consideration if we're 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 pounds overweight, that we wouldn't burn as much as if we wasn't overweight, okay? So if you were 300 and we put 60 pounds of fat on you, you wouldn't automatically go from up to 3,000 calories burned. Okay. It would probably maybe only go up to 2,600, something like that. Okay. So 2,400 calories a day. I'm about 210, so I'd burn 2,100 calories a day. And that's just being alive. So you can take a 0, put it after your body weight, and that's how many calories you burn if literally you just sat in your chair, okay? So hopefully, under the circumstances that people are doing right now, we're not just sitting at home.
Yeah, get moving a little bit, hopefully, during this time.
And we talked about this earlier in the other video, but, I think this is important to note. Like, some people who have desk jobs might be more active now that they're home.
Yeah.
Right? So this will kind of dictate what you want to do, as far as if you are setting a caloric goal. But on top of that is activity which includes the gym, but can include walking and just daily activity,
Okay.
right? And I would say on average, and it varies person to person, this could be anywhere from 500 to 1,000 calories a day, depending on how active the person, how big the person is, and then how much, activity they're doing.
Okay, perfect.
So just using you as an example of our calculations, in a day that you do, a WOD and then maybe travel to the first responders and where you're unloading gear, loading gear, and just busy all day, you could probably add 1,000, 1,200 calories to your 2,400.
Okay.
So that puts us up to 3,600 calories that you'd be burning on any
Just a base number.
on a base number.
Yep.
Right. So if we looked at, then of course, okay, I want to drop a little bit of weight, then he could, take that and say, okay, I'm burning 3,600 calories on his busy days, maybe 3,000 calories on non-busy days. Okay. We would look at it as an average, and then we would just want to have his caloric load or caloric level lower than that.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes.
All right.
We can do that.
So, for our people listening, like, you got to think about it. Okay, are you a smaller athlete or are you a larger athlete? And that's going to dictate, how much of that jump you are, right? So if you're, looking at, okay, I'm 160 pounds, I'm going to drop 20 pounds down to 140, then, you'd say, okay, I burn about 1,600 calories a day, plus I'm exercising. Then you probably need somewhere around that 1,800, 2,000 calories to lose weight.
Perfect.
Right? And I think that's important to note to a lot of people, because we do see too many people, especially if that female is the 160-pound person we're talking about, jump to those 1,000 calorie, 1,200 calorie diets, and it's just too low.
Yeah, we see a lot of people that think the less calories they consume, they're going to start losing weight.
Right.
They cut their caloric deficit down dramatically.
And what happens with that, if you are that 160-pound athlete, you're coming and you're trying to do, WOD 4 to 5 days a week, plus be active all the other days, what you'll notice is like your energy level will just bottom, right? So yeah, you're getting in here and you're doing the work for an hour in here, but then everything else during the day is just sluggish and your body's trying to save that energy.
Yeah.
Right? So those are good starting points. The lowest I would want you to start if you're trying to drop weight would be at that resting metabolic rate. So, if I was putting myself on a low calorie diet, the lowest I would want to start is 2,100. Okay. The lowest I would start you is 2,400.
Perfect.
Okay. And that would be the lowest. And I always usually do a few hundred calories over that as long as the person is active.
Awesome. On the other end of the spectrum, what would you recommend for an athlete that wants to gain weight or has trouble putting on weight?
Yeah, and I can break that down. So when we're looking at setting caloric loads for you guys as a starting point, okay, if you just take your body weight and you times it by 10 to 12 calories, that would be for fat loss. Okay. Right? So body weight times 10 to 12 is for fat loss. Maintenance, 14 to 16. And then, as you were mentioned, for weight gain, 20 to 22.
Okay, so I take that 2,400, multiply it by 15 if I want to maintain.
And then if you want to gain, you would take the 2,400 and times it by 20.
Perfect.
Yeah. And those would be starting points, guys, because you have to understand, and we see this a lot. There are people out there that what we consider hard gainers or hard, losers, right? There's just not that much wiggle room in that standpoint. But I've seen people, start them out 22 calories per pound to gain weight, and we just have to continue to increase it. They just mow through the calories. But they're great starting points, and that's the key.
Awesome. And I know some people get really into it. I wanted to get your perspective on if you get into it or keep it simple on training days they should consume this many calories, on rest days this many, or...
I think that it depends on where they're at. I think the further that you guys advance in your career as an athlete and the more you advance your career as documenting your nutrition, you can get with playing around with fueling sources. Okay. If it was someone who was brand new to tracking their food, brand new to maybe doing CrossFit, I wouldn't say don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Because it's all going to average out.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple, right? Now, as further along as you go, yes, you would want to fuel the days that you train super hard, right? And the way that I talk about that is like my macros will stay kind of consistent on the food that I eat. But if I get to go out and do a 2-hour mountain bike session, then I'm going to fuel during that session, which is going to increase the calories for that day, right? It would be the kind of same way here if someone's doing 2-a-days, or we were doing, a 40-minute, some of the harder, maybe games type of training, then you would increase the calories that you're consuming either during or post that training, which would increase the base calories.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then I know we had several, because we have an older clientele here, we had several questions come in like, do you recommend different caloric intakes for people over 50 or somebody going through menopause or anything like that? Does that change what they should be doing on calories?
It wouldn't change, some of the, we look at older athletes as we get older, a lot of times you do see, well, older individuals decrease how many calories they burn a day. A lot of times that's secondary just to losing muscle tissue as they age, right?
Okay.
But maintaining resistance training, maintaining the protein intake will help maintain the muscle tissue. Therefore, you might not see that drop, okay? But in older clients, we do sometimes need to see like protein go up because they just don't absorb protein as well as we get older. You could look at certain vitamin supplementation, maybe coenzyme 10, which is very important for older population.
Okay.
Both in older population and menopause, and it's out of my lane when I look at it, but I always do encourage to have hormones looked at. Okay, and then sometimes their endo doctor or someone that is working with hormone replacement can look at certain herbs or supplements or even replacing the hormones that are depleted, and that being the best approach in my opinion clinically for menopause or andropause from that standpoint.
Perfect. Yeah, and then from there they just start breaking down their macros from that.
Yeah, so in the best way that we always teach it, is to set calories first based on your goal, right? So most of us either want to lose body fat, we want to gain, or we want to maintain.
Yep.
Right? And I should preface gain muscle tissue, not gain body fat. So lose body fat, gain muscle, or maintain. That's where most of us are at from the standpoint of calories, right?
Okay.
Once you get that set, the next most important thing to set is protein, okay? Now I know once again in our community, we're not worried about how big our biceps are, we're not worried about stepping on stage, but don't overlook the importance of protein from a recovery aspect, okay? And I always like to use the rule of thumb is 1 gram of protein per target body weight as a good standing point, okay?
Right.
Now, so what that means is if you're that 160 pound client, you're trying to get to 140, then you would want to consume 140 grams of protein, okay? And my analogy I always use for that is like taking the dart, throwing it at the dartboard, it hits the dartboard, but you might need a little bit less than 140, you might need a little bit more than 140, but that will get you in the ballpark, right?
Awesome.
So for you, you would need somewhere around, if we looked at it, 220 grams of protein, give or take.
Okay.
Like, it's not in the world if you hit 200, it's not in the world if you hit 250, right? Somewhere in that ballpark, you're going to be okay.
Perfect. And that even goes for if somebody weighs 160 and wants to gain to 180. You
Correct.
set it to 180.
We always go by the target, right?
Yep.
Because we want to provide that additional protein in order to help build that additional tissue.
Perfect.
Right? And that's where you see sometimes like in the physique or the bodybuilding world, you see that higher protein intake, 1.5 per body weight. And that's because they're wanting to gain the muscle tissue.
Okay.
Right? So if we use that general recommendation of 1 gram of protein per target body weight, this not only works for our people wanting to gain muscle, but also works for our people who has to lose weight. Because if I have a client that's 280 that needs to get to 200, he doesn't need 280 grams protein.
Yeah.
He only needs the 200, right? So then once you have that set, it's kind of a preference.
Okay.
Because our protein's set and our calories are set, as long as I hit my calories and I get my protein in, then it doesn't really matter where the carbs and fat are at.
Perfect.
Doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of all our preference. Do you prefer to have carbs? Do you prefer to have fat?
Okay. And I know we've discussed this before, but like when people lay out their macros, ideally we want to hit all of our numbers, but is it more important to hit their protein numbers, their carb numbers, their fat numbers?
I would say in the beginning, if we're looking at it from a general recommendation, it would be protein and calories, right?
Okay.
Because then the carbs and fat have to land in there. As you progress along a little bit more, it's going to be important to find what ratio works for you. And what I mean by that is, in our setting of doing CrossFit, the workouts are high intensity. Okay? The higher the intensity that we train, the more that our body is going to utilize carbohydrate for fuel. Okay. So a lot of times, low carb diets, and I always put the term this for low carb, because what's low carb for one person might not be low carb for another.
Yeah.
Okay. But typically we do want to make sure then that we're consuming enough carbohydrate to fuel the intensity of the workouts that we're doing. Okay. And some of you guys may have experienced that. You maybe, went on a super low carb diet and then just noticed that your, intensity in the gym was a little bit lower. You just don't feel
Energy levels were a little low type thing.
correct, which is okay, right? If we looked at, I always talk about the pyramid of physique, health, and performance. If you had someone that, they need to drop 60 pounds and their triglycerides are elevated, it's okay for them to go low carb.
Okay.
They just need to, let the coaches know, like, hey, I might not be able to go full out effort
Yeah.
in the workouts because I don't have the fuel.
Yep.
So I think that's, as we progress along, that becomes important of, okay, where are these numbers at specifically for the individual, okay? And then a rule of thumb I would put out there with that is, always have your carbs in and around your workouts. I think that is a good recommendation for everybody. Right?
Okay.
Because, if you want to fuel your training, then you want to make sure that the majority of your carbohydrate, whether you have a bunch of them or you don't have that many, are coming in and around that workout.
Kind of before or after?
Correct.
Is there any, so along that line with having your carbs around your workouts, is there any carbs you recommend are better for performance around your workouts, or should they eat rice before, should they eat fruit before?
I think it's going to vary person to person,
Okay.
right? Because some people, can consume fruit and maybe not have any issues out of the digestion. But I know some people who, like with rice, maybe will get some bloating out of rice. And so it really just depends upon the person from that standpoint, right?
Okay.
Now, as a rule of thumb, the closer it is to a workout, the faster you want that carbohydrate to digest.
So along those same lines with the post-workout shake, we get a lot of members that have heard in the past and they come to us saying that they need to consume a post-workout shake within X number of minutes after the workout and then food and X number of minutes after that in order to get the results they're looking for. What's your intake or your view on that?
Well, so it needs to be 7.5 minutes post-workout.
To a T.
To a
Can't be
T.
a second over.
Yeah. Now, and so what you want to remember that is like if you hit your nutrition for the day, your body will recover. Like if you get the carbohydrate in for the day, your muscle glycogen is going to recover. You get the protein in, your body will recover. But when we start, talking about the post-workout shake, as I was mentioning earlier, hit your protein for the day, get a post-workout shake. We're talking about getting into optimal.
Okay.
Right. So talk about optimal nutrition for optimal recovery. You hear that window of opportunity after the workout, and it's because when we do resistance training or you do high intensity training, you change the receptor site's sensitivity on the muscle cells, which just means that it wants to take in the nutrition that you take, right? And then that baseline and that change is going to return back to normal within an hour. So that's the reason you always hear, get something in within an hour of training.
Okay.
So what you want to look for, optimal in that is a whey protein isolate because that digests super fast. It's the fasting digesting protein that you can get, okay? And then you want to get a glucose or a dextrose would be your carbohydrate that you would look for,
Okay.
right? So you want that combination of both the carbohydrate and the protein, okay?
Perfect.
Now, if someone did chocolate milk, would chocolate milk work? Yes. It just wouldn't be as optimal as the dextrose and the whey protein isolate. Right?
Okay.
And not to dive down that rabbit hole, but like chocolate milk is lactose that has to go to the liver to be digested before it turns into glucose, right?
Yep.
Now, is it better than doing nothing? Yes, but that's where you just see so much online that it has to be this or have to be that. The biggest thing, guys, is remember if you get some liquid nutrition of protein and carbs in the post-workout setting, and it fits your total macros and goals for the day, that is better than not doing it. And then optimal would be that glucose and the whey protein isolate.
Awesome. And then just to wrap things up here, you definitely know what kind of members we have and kind of the age we work with. What would be if you could give them one tip on their diet, what would that be as we end here today?
Yeah, so what I always tell people, don't overthink it, guys. Like most of us, that are here is, go back to our little pyramid that we draw. Like we care about our performance, we care about our health, and we care a little bit about our aesthetics, right?
Yeah.
And just know that, if you want to shy a little bit more towards any of those, it's going to start with documenting first, right? So, and when I say document, it's like I don't want you tracking your food 365 days a year, but tracking your food for a good 8-week period to kind of learn your habits and to see, are you consuming enough protein? Are you overeating on this macro or the other is a great place to start.
Awesome. Well, we greatly appreciate you sharing the information. I hope everybody that's watching got some good tips out of this, and now we can start addressing our diet concerns and improving how we eat. But thanks a lot for taking time with us
See you
today.
guys.